The child crawled out from the debris, and the medic said, "You're the only one I came for." The world had cracked open, not with a single cataclysmic roar, but with a series of shattering gasps that echoed across continents. Steel skeletons clawed at a bruised sky, monuments to a civilization that had turned its formidable might upon itself. Dust, thick as forgotten memory, coated everything, blurring the lines between what once was and what now lay in ruins. This was the landscape of conflict, a canvas painted in shades of gray and ochre, where the very air tasted of ash and loss. In the relentless machinery of war, the individual became a cog, a uniform, a statistic. Humanity itself seemed buried beneath the rubble, a casualty of its own relentless fury, its compassion seemingly a forgotten relic beneath layers of fear and hatred. Yet, even in the deepest trenches of despair, a flicker persisted, a stubborn, fragile light. For those who lived through it, and for us who inherit its echoes, these moments were not mere anomalies, but profound revelations. They were whispered truths that defied the thunder of artillery, proving that the human spirit, though bent and scarred, could not be entirely broken. These were the instances when the rigid lines of allegiance blurred, when the uniform became secondary to the shared pulse of life, when the enemy became simply another soul in distress. Such narratives, often relegated to the shadows of grand historical accounts, held the truest measure of our enduring capacity for grace. He moved through this desolation, a ghost in a uniform, his boots crunching on the detritus of shattered lives. His name, his home, the dreams he once held, they were distant echoes, swallowed by the immediacy of survival. His world had shrunk to the next breath, the next wound, the next fallen comrade. He was a medic, a healer in a war that mocked healing, his hands stained not just with grime, but with the indelible marks of countless attempts to mend the unmendable. Each day was a brutal repetition, a cycle of desperate triage, of binding wounds that would inevitably reopen, of whispering reassurances into ears that might never hear again. He had built walls around his heart, thick and unyielding, a necessary defense against the tidal wave of suffering that threatened to drown him. Compassion, he had learned, was a luxury in this inferno, a weakness that could cost precious seconds, or even a life. His purpose was clear, his duty absolute, defined by the insignia on his sleeve and the lives he was sworn to protect, and only those lives. His gaze, usually sharp and calculating, scanned the devastated street, not for beauty, but for danger, for movement, for the next casualty. The silence, when it came, was often more terrifying than the explosions, a hollow void pregnant with unseen threats. He had learned to read the language of destruction, the subtle shifts in the rubble, the way a shadow fell, the scent of fresh char. But nothing in his grim training, nothing in the countless horrors he had witnessed, could have prepared him for what happened next. Then, from the fractured spine of what was once a home, a whisper of movement. A small, trembling form, impossibly small, began to extricate itself from the chaos. A child, not a soldier, not a combatant, but a tiny, fragile being, caked in dust and fear, emerging from a tomb of brick and splintered wood. Its clothes were tattered, its face streaked with grime and tears, its eyes wide with a terror that transcended any uniform, any nationality. The child crawled, a slow, arduous journey across jagged edges and pulverized memories, a testament to an instinct for survival that defied all logic. In that moment, the medic's hardened shell cracked. The walls he had so meticulously constructed around his heart began to crumble. Not with a crash, but with a silent, internal tremor. The world, for an instant, ceased to be a battlefield. It became simply a place where a child was lost, and a human being, regardless of allegiance, was found. This was the call, stark and undeniable, that cut through the noise of war, demanding a response that went beyond duty, beyond orders, beyond self-preservation. It was a call to a humanity he thought he had buried deep within himself. A cold, calculated logic surged through the medic, a familiar shield against the overwhelming chaos. Every fiber of his being, honed by relentless training and the brutal realities of the front, screamed for him to adhere to protocol. His mission was clear: attend to the wounded of his own side, maintain his position, avoid unnecessary risks. The fragile, solitary figure amidst the wreckage represented an unauthorized diversion, a perilous unknown, a breach of every tactical directive. The danger was palpable. A lone medic venturing into the open, even for a moment, invited sniper fire or a sudden ambush. The sheer futility, too, gnawed at him. What difference could he, one man, make against the crushing tide of this war, one child, against countless others lost and forgotten? This internal debate, sharp and unforgiving, threatened to paralyze him, holding him captive between ingrained duty and a burgeoning, unwelcome flicker of something else entirely. He felt the weight of every casualty he hadn't been able to save, every face that had slipped away under his desperate hands. That lingering guilt, often a silent companion, now intensified, whispering doubts about his capacity for true impact. He had learned to compartmentalize, to view suffering through a lens of triage and efficiency, but this small, vulnerable life defied such clinical detachment. His own past, a distant echo from a time before uniforms and gunfire, offered no easy answers. A childhood of stark choices and hard-won lessons had taught him self-reliance, a necessary armor, yet it also highlighted the profound vulnerability of the young. Now this stark image, a mirror reflecting a forgotten innocence, chipped away at his carefully constructed defenses. Yet, amidst the chilling calculus of risk and reward, a different voice began to stir. It wasn't a command, but a memory, soft as dust motes dancing in sunbeams. He recalled an old man, a village elder from his youth, whose hands had always been rough with labor but whose eyes held an unwavering kindness. The elder had once spoken of an invisible thread connecting all living things, a thread that, if pulled too taut by hatred, would snap, leaving only emptiness. He had spoken of the true strength lying not in the ability to destroy, but in the unwavering will to preserve, to mend, to extend a hand even when the world demanded a clenched fist. This quiet wisdom, long buried beneath the din of war, resurfaced with unexpected clarity, a subtle but profound challenge to his current rigid worldview. Furthermore, the very stillness of the child, its absolute helplessness, seemed to amplify the silence around them, making the usual sounds of distant conflict fade into a muffled hum. The immediate threat, while ever present, felt momentarily less pressing than the undeniable presence of this singular, desperate plea. The elder's words resonated with an almost physical force, urging him to look beyond the uniform, beyond the enemy lines, to the universal fragility of life itself. His heart, long accustomed to a steady professional rhythm, now beat with an unsettling urgency, a conflict between the soldier's imperative and the human being's instinct. Consequently, a crucial shift began to occur within him. The medic, still hesitant, still wrestling with the profound implications of his potential actions, found his gaze drawn not to the dangers lurking in the shadows, but to the small trembling form. The logical arguments for inaction, for self-preservation, for adhering to the cold demands of war, began to lose their sharp edges. The elder's gentle philosophy, a beacon from a simpler time, illuminated a path forward that was fraught with risk, yet undeniably compelling. He was still a soldier bound by duty, but the man beneath the uniform was beginning to reassert himself, prompted by a quiet, persistent wisdom that defied the very nature of conflict. His journey across the threshold was not yet complete, but the first agonizing steps of internal transformation had been taken, guided by a ghost of compassion and a memory of profound, unassuming grace. A silent decision, heavier than any weapon, settled upon him. The medic, no longer merely observing, took a deliberate step forward, then another, his boots crushing debris with a newfound purpose. This was not a hesitant advance, but a decisive break from the perimeter of his prescribed existence. The landscape, moments ago a tapestry of threats and strategic points, transmuted into a singular urgent focus: the child. His uniform, once a symbol of rigid allegiance, now felt like a second skin, a shell that both defined and confined him, but one he was now consciously choosing to stretch beyond its intended limits. The air, previously thick with the scent of fear and cordite, seemed to carry a different resonance, a faint, almost imperceptible hum of pure, unadulterated vulnerability. As he closed the distance, the world around him shed its familiar contours. The tactical map in his mind, with its red lines of engagement and safe zones, spontaneously dissolved. He was no longer navigating a battlefield, but an uncharted emotional terrain where established rules of engagement held no sway. This singular act of moving towards the child, an individual choice made in the crucible of collective conflict, became a crucible in itself, forging a new path not just for his immediate actions, but for the very essence of his being. The commitment was instantaneous and absolute. There would be no turning back, no retracing steps to the safety of indifference or duty as he had known it. Moreover, this shift was not merely an internal revelation, it fundamentally altered his relationship with the conflict itself. The war, which had consumed his identity and dictated his every move, now seemed to recede, if only for a fleeting moment, becoming a distant rumble rather than an immediate, all-encompassing reality. His focus narrowed, intense and unyielding, on the small, trembling figure. He understood, with a clarity that stung, that his actions had now placed him in a precarious limbo, neither fully within the lines of his own side, nor truly outside the reach of the enemy. This new vulnerability, distinct from the physical dangers of combat, was a moral exposure, a profound isolation born of a solitary, defiant act of grace. A profound insight began to unfurl within him, a stark realization that transcended the immediate need to aid. He recognized that the deepest chasms separating humanity were not always forged by ideology or nationality, but by the absence of a simple, direct response to suffering. In that moment, the child was not an enemy civilian or a potential trap, but a pure, unadorned expression of life's fragile persistence. This understanding, born not of contemplation but of decisive movement, shattered the illusion that compassion was a luxury reserved for peacetime or for one's own kind. It revealed itself as an inherent, undeniable force, capable of piercing through the thickest veils of hatred and fear, a fundamental truth that demanded recognition regardless of the uniform worn. Consequently, the stakes were no longer confined to the success or failure of a military objective. They had expanded to encompass the very soul of his existence. He was now operating under a different, more ancient code, one that prioritized the sanctity of life above all else, even above the directives of his commanders. This choice, while offering a profound sense of purpose, simultaneously opened him to an entirely new set of dangers. He faced not just the physical threat of enemy fire, but the potential scorn and judgment of his own comrades, the accusations of dereliction of duty, even betrayal. His journey had become profoundly personal, a solitary pilgrimage into a moral wilderness where the old maps offered no guidance, and the path ahead was carved only by the unwavering resolve of a single compassionate heart. The immediate aftermath of his choice was not a sudden reprieve from danger, but an intensification of it. As he knelt beside the small, trembling form, the silence of the shattered street seemed to amplify, becoming a deafening roar in his ears. Every shadow appeared to lengthen, every gust of wind carried the phantom whisper of enemy movement. The child, barely more than a toddler, flinched at his approach, its eyes wide, reflecting not understanding, but a primal, untamed terror. This was a fear that transcended the uniform, burrowing deep into the very core of innocence, a profound consequence of the world it had been born into. His initial gesture of reaching out, intended as reassurance, was met with a recoiling gasp, underscoring the formidable chasm of distrust and trauma that separated them. Navigating the treacherous landscape with the child proved a challenge far greater than any combat exercise. The ground, a mosaic of jagged glass, splintered wood, and twisted metal, demanded meticulous attention. Each step became a calculated risk, not just for his own safety, but for the fragile life he now held. The child, surprisingly light yet utterly unresponsive, was a dead weight in his arms, its small body shivering uncontrollably, a vivid testament to prolonged exposure and shock. He found himself constantly scanning, not just for threats, but for the clearest, safest path, his professional training now repurposed for an entirely different kind of protection. The burden was immense, a physical and emotional weight that pressed down on him with crushing force. A profound moral dilemma soon presented itself, stark and uncompromising. His medical kit, a lifeline for countless soldiers, contained finite resources: bandages, antiseptics, a single morphine syringe. The child's injuries, though not immediately life-threatening, required attention. Yet every supply expended on this unauthorized rescue meant one less for a comrade he might encounter, a soldier whose life he was officially sworn to save. This was the brutal calculus of war, forcing a choice between an immediate, undeniable human need and the abstract, yet equally compelling demand of duty to his own unit. He wrestled with the implications, understanding that either path carried a significant ethical cost, testing the very foundation of his newfound conviction. Then, a new layer of peril materialized. A distant glint, caught by the fading afternoon light, suggested movement on a ridge overlooking their position. It could be an enemy patrol or even his own side, equally likely to view his actions with suspicion. The instinct to hide, to protect his charge, warred with the desperate need for aid. This was no clear-cut enemy engagement. Instead, it presented a nuanced threat where an unknown party, driven by their own imperatives of survival and vigilance, could easily misinterpret his humanitarian act as a hostile maneuver. The fragility of his unique position became acutely clear. Caught between the hammer of war and the anvil of his conscience, the deepest fear that now consumed him was not of death, but of compromise. He dreaded the moment he might be forced to abandon the child, to choose his own survival over the innocent life he had vowed to protect. The very act of compassion, which had initially felt like a liberation, now seemed to expose him to a vulnerability far more profound than physical injury. What if, under duress, he succumbed to the primal urge for self-preservation, betraying the fragile glimmer of humanity he had found? This internal struggle, a battle for his own moral integrity, was perhaps the most brutal test of all, threatening to unravel the very core values he was striving to uphold. Furthermore, earning the child's trust became an escalating challenge without the luxury of language. He communicated not with words, but with the gentle firmness of his grip, the slow, deliberate movements of his hands as he tended to a small cut, the steady rhythm of his breathing. The child's initial flinching gradually softened, replaced by a wary stillness, a tentative acceptance born of sheer exhaustion and the absence of further harm. This silent negotiation, conducted amidst the ruins, became a testament to the universal language of care, a delicate dance between fear and the desperate human need for comfort. Now, consider how this applies when you encounter someone whose past trauma has built impenetrable walls. A true connection often begins not with grand pronouncements, but with small, consistent gestures of unwavering presence. The brittle silence, a constant companion in the desolate urban landscape, abruptly splintered. A sharp metallic click echoed, impossibly loud, followed by the unmistakable thud of boots on rubble, drawing inexorably closer. This was not the distant rumble of artillery, but an immediate palpable presence, a shadow lengthening over their exposed position. 3 figures, clad in enemy uniforms, emerged from the skeletal remains of a building, their rifles raised, their expressions grim and unyielding. The medic froze. The child clutched tightly against his chest, the weight of its small, still body a stark counterpoint to the sudden, overwhelming surge of adrenaline. This was the precipice, the point of no return, where all his earlier internal conflicts coalesced into a singular, terrifying reality. Time seemed to stretch, elastic and agonizing, as the soldiers advanced. Their voices, though unintelligible, carried an edge of cold command. The medic's mind, usually a whirlwind of tactical assessments, cleared with chilling precision. He understood, with absolute certainty, that he had 2 choices: surrender and risk both their lives to the unpredictable whims of war, or make a desperate, last-ditch effort to shield the child, even if it meant sacrificing himself. The latter, an act of pure, unadulterated selflessness, crystallized in his consciousness not as a choice but as an inescapable imperative. His arm, a conduit for his newfound resolve, tightened around the child, pulling its fragile form even closer, a human shield against the looming threat. In that heart-stopping instant, a single, sharp crack pierced the air. A bullet, a whisper of death, found its mark. Not on the child, but on the medic. A searing pain blossoming in his side, a brutal confirmation of his protective stance. He stumbled, the impact momentarily stealing his breath, yet his grip on the child remained unyielding. The world tilted, a kaleidoscope of pain and dust, but through the haze he saw the child's eyes, no longer wide with abstract terror, but focused on him, a nascent spark of something akin to understanding, or perhaps simply a reflection of his own desperate resolve. The act was raw, instinctive, a primal defense of innocence against the encroaching darkness. As he fell, carefully cushioning the child with his own body, the soldiers' advance faltered. Their initial aggression gave way to a moment of stunned hesitation, their rifles lowering incrementally. The sight of a uniformed enemy, wounded and vulnerable, yet still shielding a small, innocent life, seemed to disrupt the established order of their world. It was a tableau that defied the narratives of hatred and dehumanization they had been fed. A stark, undeniable image of shared humanity emerging from the very jaws of conflict. This unexpected pause, this brief chasm in the ceaseless march of war, became the true reward, a testament to the profound power of a singular, selfless act. A profound realization washed over the medic, even as pain threatened to consume him. The uniform, the nation, the ideology, all of it faded into insignificance. What remained was the undeniable, visceral connection to the small life nestled against him, and the unexpected, almost miraculous cessation of hostile intent from the approaching figures. He had not seized a physical sword, but a deeper truth, that the most potent weapon against the forces of division was an act of unconditional compassion, a defiant affirmation of life's inherent worth. This insight, born from the crucible of near death, was his elixir, a hard-won understanding that transcended any victory on a battlefield. Now, consider how this applies when facing seemingly insurmountable divides in your own life. When the lines of conflict appear absolute and the other side seems entirely alien, a deliberate act of empathy, however small or seemingly insignificant, possesses the power to dismantle barriers. It doesn't erase the conflict, but it can redefine the terms of engagement, revealing the shared ground of humanity beneath layers of difference. The child, once a symbol of vulnerability, now represented the profound, transformative potential embedded within every act of grace, a quiet testament to the enduring light that even the darkest trenches cannot extinguish. The silent communication, the desperate need for protection, and the subsequent tentative understanding had culminated in this moment of raw, undeniable connection, a profound echo of universal belonging. The immediate aftermath of the medic's fall, while marking a pivotal shift in the external narrative, initiated an even more profound and enduring transformation within him. The bullet wound, though grievous, was merely the tangible manifestation of a deeper incision into his psyche. As he was eventually tended to, the physical pain became a constant, throbbing reminder, a sentinel guarding the entrance to a new, unsettling internal landscape. This was not simply a recovery from injury, but a fundamental recalibration of his sensory and emotional registers. The sharp crack of gunfire, once merely a signal of danger, now carried a chilling echo of the moment his body had intercepted fate. The child's soft breathing, once a desperate plea, now resonated with the fragile persistence of life itself, a sound that would forever intertwine with the memory of searing pain and defiant protection. Beyond the immediate physical healing, a pervasive sense of disquiet began to settle over him. The hypervigilance demanded by the battlefield, previously a survival mechanism, morphed into an almost unbearable sensitivity to his surroundings. Every unexpected noise, every sudden movement, triggered a primal jolt, a phantom reenactment of the moment the enemy soldiers had appeared. Sleep offered little solace, haunted by vivid, fragmented images, the child's wide eyes, the glint of a rifle barrel, the dizzying sensation of falling. These nocturnal visitations, far from fading, intensified, weaving themselves into the fabric of his waking thoughts, creating a persistent, low hum of anxiety that underscored his every interaction. He found himself constantly scanning faces, searching for something he couldn't quite name, a resonance of the unexpected mercy he had encountered. Furthermore, the act of defiance, of prioritizing a single innocent life over military protocol, created a profound chasm between his lived experience and the prevailing ethos of war. His comrades, though perhaps relieved by his survival, could not fully grasp the internal architecture of his transformation. He carried a secret wisdom, a knowledge of humanity's unexpected capacity for grace that set him apart. This unique perspective, while invaluable to him, paradoxically fostered a subtle but pervasive sense of isolation. Conversations about combat, about victory and loss, now felt hollow, tinged with an unarticulated understanding that the truest battles were often fought not with weapons, but within the confines of one's own conscience. This internal divergence was a consequence far more lasting than any physical scar. Subsequently, his perception of the enemy underwent an irreversible metamorphosis. The monolithic, faceless entity he had been trained to fear and despise had fractured into individual faces, one of them bearing an expression of tentative, unexpected humanity. This realization was both liberating and deeply unsettling. It complicated the simple narratives of good versus evil, embedding shades of gray into a world he had previously understood in stark black and white. He began to question the very foundations of the conflict, not in a grand, political sense, but on a deeply personal, ethical level. The uniforms, once clear markers of identity, now seemed like thin veils, easily pierced by a shared vulnerability. Another crucial layer of consequence was the enduring weight of responsibility. The child, whose life he had undoubtedly saved, became an indelible part of his personal history, a living testament to his choice. He wondered about its fate, about the memories it carried, about the life it would build from the ashes. This concern was not a fleeting thought, but a persistent undercurrent, a silent promise he had made in the moment of desperate protection. It was a commitment that transcended the immediate crisis, extending into an uncertain future, binding him to a destiny he had inadvertently shaped. Now, consider how this applies when you have made a profoundly impactful decision, one that reshapes not only your path, but also the trajectory of others. The ripples of such choices extend far beyond the initial act, creating a tapestry of unforeseen connections and responsibilities. The consequences are not merely transactional. They become integral to who you are, influencing your values, your outlook, and your capacity for empathy in subsequent encounters. The medic, having stared into the abyss of war and chosen humanity, found himself carrying not just the physical wounds, but the profound, resonant echoes of that singular defining moment, forever altering his internal compass. This was the burden and the blessing of his survival, the unyielding truth that some experiences carve pathways in the soul that can never be entirely filled. The world he returned to, though physically intact, bore its own invisible scars, a landscape of fractured trust and simmering resentment. The medic, now a civilian, carried within him not just the mended wound in his side, but a profound, almost sacred understanding of the human spirit's capacity for both immense cruelty and astonishing grace. His journey back from the front lines was less a geographic transition and more a crossing into a different dimension of perception, one where the clear-cut divisions of war had dissolved into a complex tapestry of shared vulnerability. He found solace not in grand narratives of victory, but in the quiet, unassuming moments that spoke of enduring connection. His presence in his hometown was subtle, yet transformative. He didn't speak often of the conflict, for the deepest lessons rarely required words. Instead, his elixir manifested in his demeanor, a profound, unwavering patience, a gaze that seemed to penetrate superficialities, and an innate gentleness that belied his wartime experiences. He became a silent anchor in a community still reeling, a man who, without preaching, exemplified a quiet courage rooted in compassion. People gravitated towards him, drawn by an unspoken aura of peace, seeking counsel not through direct inquiry, but through observation of his steadfast nature. This shift in his being wasn't an easy acquisition. It demanded a continuous internal vigilance. The final, symbolic test of his transformation came not on a battlefield, but in the everyday interactions of post-war society. He encountered the lingering bitterness, the entrenched prejudice, the casual dehumanization of former adversaries that persisted long after the armistice. His resurrection lay in his unwavering refusal to succumb to these divisive currents. He would listen, truly listen, to narratives of hatred without judgment, yet without endorsing them, offering instead a quiet space for reflection, a subtle counter-narrative of shared humanity. This was his ultimate triumph, maintaining empathy in the face of pervasive cynicism, proving that the heart could remain open even when the world demanded it close. Furthermore, his life became a testament to the power of restorative action. He gravitated towards work that involved mending, not just bodies but fractured relationships and broken trust. He might volunteer at an orphanage or quietly assist families struggling to rebuild their lives, always with an unassuming humility. His hands, once skilled in triage, now found purpose in construction, in tending gardens, in crafting small, beautiful objects from discarded materials, acts of creation that symbolically countered the destruction he had witnessed. These were not grand gestures, but consistent, deliberate choices that wove a new pattern of meaning into the fabric of his existence. Consequently, the ripples of his singular act of compassion spread far beyond his immediate circle. Children, instinctively sensing his profound kindness, would flock to him, finding in his quiet presence a sanctuary from the harsh realities of their own scarred world. He taught them, not through lectures, but through example, the intrinsic value of every living thing, the delicate balance of nature, and the quiet strength found in extending a hand. His influence was a gentle rain, slowly nurturing seeds of empathy in a landscape parched by conflict, demonstrating that the most profound lessons are often absorbed through lived experience rather than explicit instruction. Another crucial layer of his legacy was the subtle erosion of the us versus them mentality in those he encountered. By simply being a man who had seen the humanity in an enemy, he implicitly challenged the rigid categories that had fueled the war. He didn't actively debate or argue. Rather, his very existence, imbued with the hard-won wisdom of his ordeal, served as a living question mark against simplistic hatred. He offered a quiet, undeniable proof that compassion was not a weakness, but a formidable strength, capable of bridging the widest chasms of division. Now, consider how this applies when confronting entrenched biases in your own community. True transformation often begins not with loud pronouncements, but with the consistent, quiet demonstration of alternative values. A single individual, embodying a profound commitment to empathy and understanding, can become a catalyst for change, subtly shifting perspectives and fostering a deeper appreciation for shared humanity. The medic's return, therefore, was not merely the end of his personal odyssey, but the beginning of a quiet, persistent legacy, a living echo of humanity's enduring capacity for light, even in the long shadow of its darkest hours. The profound tranquility that now emanated from the medic, a quiet resonance in his later years, was not merely the absence of turmoil, but a carefully cultivated inner landscape. This peace represented the ultimate integration of his harrowing wartime experiences, a testament to his profound transformation. It was a strength forged in the crucible of despair, allowing him to navigate the complexities of life with an unshakable poise, his spirit unburdened by the bitterness that often consumed survivors. This singular quality, an almost palpable serenity, became his true spiritual resurrection, a daily affirmation of life's inherent sanctity against the backdrop of a world still prone to division and discord. The veritable elixir he brought back, therefore, was not a tangible object, but a profound shift in perspective, a lens through which humanity could re-evaluate its own capacity for grace. He offered a vital counter-narrative to the prevailing cynicism, demonstrating that shared vulnerability often formed a more potent bond than any ideological barrier. This gift was the living proof that even in the most dehumanizing circumstances, the choice to extend compassion remained, a defiant act that could reorient entire moral compasses. It was an insight into the true architecture of human connection, emphasizing that empathy, far from being a weakness, was the most formidable strength. Moreover, the reach of his transformed spirit extended far beyond his immediate interactions, weaving itself into the broader tapestry of communal memory. His story, often recounted in hushed tones by those who knew him, became a quiet legend, a subtle undercurrent shaping the moral fabric of his town and beyond. It was absorbed not through direct instruction, but through osmosis, inspiring others to seek common ground, to question ingrained prejudices, and to recognize the universal spark of humanity in unexpected places. This organic transmission of his values, like seeds carried on the wind, ensured that the lessons of his defining moment continued to blossom across generations. His resurrection was not a singular dramatic event, but an ongoing, unwavering commitment to the principles that had saved him. It manifested in his steadfast refusal to entertain narratives of hatred or vengeance, even when tempting. Each day presented a renewed, subtle test, the casual slight against a former enemy, the resurgence of nationalist fervor, the temptation to retreat into the comforting simplicity of black and white judgments. Yet he consistently chose the harder path, the one illuminated by empathy, affirming that the ultimate victory lay not in conquest, but in the persistent cultivation of human understanding. This continuous affirmation of his deepest convictions solidified his legacy. Now consider how this applies when confronting the persistent echoes of past conflicts, whether personal or societal. The medic's life illustrated that true healing and reconciliation begin with the courage to see beyond the uniform, beyond the label, to the shared humanity beneath. His enduring presence was a living testament to the fact that while wars may leave indelible scars, they do not have to dictate the future trajectory of the human heart. His actions provided a blueprint for moving forward, not by forgetting, but by transforming the memory of suffering into a catalyst for profound, lasting change. Ultimately, the medic's legacy transcended the specific events of his life, blossoming into a timeless message of enduring hope. It was a testament to the resilient spirit that persists even when confronted with humanity's darkest impulses. His story reminds us that kindness does not eradicate conflict, but it undeniably survives it, offering a beacon of possibility in the aftermath of devastation. His life became a quiet, profound affirmation that within each individual lies the potential for acts of extraordinary grace, a capacity that, when harnessed, has the power to illuminate the path toward a more compassionate and interconnected future for all. His narrative, far from fading into the annals of forgotten conflicts, quietly ascended to the realm of archetype. It transcended the specific coordinates of time and place, becoming a universal fable of profound human potential. This was not merely a tale of survival, but an enduring testament to the innate capacity for empathy that resides, often dormant, within the deepest recesses of the human heart. His singular decision, made amidst the cacophony of destruction, etched itself into the collective unconscious as a potent symbol. An ordinary individual, stripped of all pretense, choosing light over shadow. It became a touchstone for countless others grappling with their own moral quandaries, a vivid illustration that true courage often manifests not in overt aggression, but in quiet, defiant acts of connection. This enduring resonance transformed his personal history into a shared inheritance, a foundational myth for understanding humanity's better angels. Subsequent generations, removed from the immediate crucible of that brutal war, discovered in his story a timeless wisdom. They reinterpreted its meaning through the lens of their own challenges, finding in his courage a mirror for contemporary struggles against prejudice, indifference, and systemic division. The details of the original event, while historically anchored, became less important than the enduring spirit of his action. His legacy was not a static monument, but a living, evolving current, flowing through new contexts and inspiring fresh applications of compassion. It became a powerful argument for the enduring relevance of individual moral agency, reminding each new era that even in the face of overwhelming forces, one person's choice can ignite a spark that refuses to be extinguished. Consider, for instance, how acts of unexpected kindness in today's polarized digital spaces echo the same fundamental human impulse. This pervasive influence subtly reshaped the very definition of heroism. Beyond the valor of battle or the triumphs of conquest, his narrative posited a different kind of strength, one rooted in vulnerability, in the willingness to cross manufactured boundaries, and in the profound humility of service to all life. It challenged the conventional glorification of power, suggesting instead that the most potent force for positive change resided in acts of uncalculated altruism. Such a perspective encouraged a deeper introspection into what truly constitutes human greatness, shifting the focus from external achievements to internal fortitude and ethical conviction. It presented a compelling argument for the often overlooked heroism of quiet humanity, a radical reevaluation of societal values. The symbolic power of his singular intervention extended far beyond individual inspiration. It served as a profound critique of the grand, often dehumanizing narratives of history. By focusing on an act of human connection between declared enemies, his story implicitly questioned the absolute divisions propagated by conflict. It highlighted the artificiality of labels and the shared vulnerability that binds all human beings, regardless of uniform or flag. This potent symbolism offered a vital counterpoint to the official chronicles of war, which frequently emphasized strategic victories and political maneuvering while often overlooking the profound individual acts of grace that defy such classifications. It underscored that history is not solely written by the powerful, but also by the quiet, defiant choices of ordinary people. Crucially, his legacy encompassed not only the directly inspired, but also the countless, unseen ripples of influence. Many who never heard the full account, but merely encountered its essence through a shared anecdote or a subtle shift in community ethos, were nonetheless touched. This unseen impact, like the silent growth of a deep root system, nourished a collective conscience, fostering a heightened awareness of ethical responsibilities even in mundane interactions. It was a testament to the idea that acts of profound goodness possess an inherent transmissibility, capable of subtly altering the moral climate without explicit recognition. Indeed, the true measure of such a legacy often lies in its anonymous, pervasive influence, shaping the unseen currents of human behavior. Moreover, his life's ultimate message reframed hope not as a passive expectation, but as an active, courageous choice. It articulated that hope was not merely wishing for a better outcome, but the resolute decision to act in alignment with one's highest values, even when the surrounding reality offered only despair. His journey demonstrated that hope, in its purest form, demands engagement, vulnerability, and an unwavering commitment to the belief in shared humanity, irrespective of immediate circumstances. This dynamic understanding of hope transformed it from a fragile sentiment into a powerful, transformative force, an engine for ongoing ethical action in a world perpetually teetering on the brink of division. Ultimately, his enduring narrative offered a profound integration of trauma and grace, illustrating humanity's potential for post-traumatic growth on a societal scale. It posited that from the deepest wounds of collective suffering could emerge a heightened capacity for empathy and a more profound understanding of interconnectedness. His story suggested that the very experience of confronting humanity's darkest impulses could, paradoxically, unlock its greatest virtues, paving the way for a more resilient and compassionate future. This profound insight served as a timeless reminder that true progress often arises from the crucible of adversity, transforming pain into wisdom and division into a deeper sense of universal belonging. Now, consider how this applies when confronting the persistent echoes of past conflicts, whether personal or societal. The enduring narrative of the medic's singular act of compassion began to weave itself into the very fabric of institutional thought, subtly influencing the burgeoning discourse around humanitarian conduct in warfare. While not immediately codified into formal treaties, his story, along with others like it, provided vital ethical ballast to the evolving principles of international law. It underscored the imperative of protecting non-combatants and extending succor even across enemy lines, thereby reinforcing the foundational tenets of what would become modern humanitarian norms. This quiet yet persistent pressure, exerted by a collective memory of grace, pushed against the brutal logic of total war, advocating for a universal standard of care irrespective of allegiance. Beyond formal frameworks, the medic's example found a different kind of immortality through cultural dissemination. His tale, often embellished or distilled to its core essence, appeared not just in historical accounts, but in the nascent forms of post-war art and literature. It inspired playwrights to explore themes of reconciliation, artists to depict shared suffering, and poets to craft verses celebrating the resilience of kindness. These creative interpretations, each a unique facet of a larger truth, ensured that the moral resonance of his actions transcended mere historical fact, becoming a vibrant, living part of cultural memory, a constant reminder of humanity's capacity for redemption. Furthermore, his actions inadvertently fostered the concept of moral sanctuaries, not physical places, but conceptual spaces where the rules of conflict momentarily dissolved in favor of shared humanity. This idea, born from the spontaneous act of one man, resonated deeply within communities grappling with the psychological scars of war. It suggested that even amidst destruction, moments of profound connection could create temporary zones of peace, offering glimpses of a world where division was not absolute. Such an insight became a powerful psychological tool for healing, enabling survivors to envision a future where reconciliation, however difficult, was genuinely possible. Building on this, subsequent generations faced the active challenge of interpreting and applying this legacy to their own times. They weren't passive recipients of a historical anecdote. Rather, they became active participants in its ongoing meaning. Confronted with new forms of conflict and societal polarization, they drew upon the medic's story not as a finished lesson, but as a dynamic framework for ethical decision-making. His example urged them to actively seek common ground, to challenge emerging biases, and to champion the cause of empathy in the face of renewed fragmentation, thereby revitalizing the core message for contemporary relevance. Consequently, the global implications of such individual acts began to emerge with greater clarity. The medic's story illustrated that the seeds of universal peace were often sown not in grand diplomatic halls, but in the intimate, risky choices made by ordinary people during extraordinary times. It highlighted that true progress in conflict resolution depended as much on fostering interpersonal empathy as on strategic negotiations. This perspective offered a vital counter-narrative to geopolitical fatalism, suggesting that the path towards a more humane world was paved by countless individual acts of courage and compassion, each a small but significant step towards bridging divides. Another crucial layer of his lasting impact was the ongoing challenge of maintaining such a legacy against the relentless tide of new divisions. The world, continually generating fresh conflicts and animosities, constantly tested the endurance of his message. Yet the story persisted, a quiet bulwark against the forces of hatred, serving as a reminder that the human spirit, when confronted with the choice, could always lean towards understanding. This persistent cultural echo, far from being a mere historical footnote, became a vital, active force in shaping future ethical landscapes. Now consider how this applies when you encounter narratives that seek to demonize entire groups of people. The medic's legacy provides a potent counter-argument, urging us to look beyond the labels, to seek the shared humanity that invariably lies beneath. It compels us to recognize that while conflicts may rage, the fundamental capacity for empathy remains an enduring transformative power, a testament to the resilient and often surprising depths of the human heart, capable of building bridges where walls once stood. The profound impact of the medic's journey extended beyond the immediate sphere of remembrance, subtly altering the collective unconscious of subsequent generations. His story, alongside similar acts of profound human connection, began to permeate the very atmosphere of societal thought, fostering a gradual, almost imperceptible shift in how individuals perceived the other. This wasn't merely a matter of historical record. It represented a deep-seated cultural absorption, where the possibility of empathy across divides became slightly more ingrained, a default setting nudged closer to compassion. It cultivated a quiet expectation that, even in moments of extreme adversity, acts of unexpected grace were not only possible, but inherently human, thereby softening the rigid edges of collective cynicism. This evolving understanding also redefined the very essence of moral fortitude. It moved beyond the conventional valor of facing external dangers, highlighting instead the immense bravery required to dismantle one's own ingrained prejudices and challenge deeply held conditioning. The medic's choice exemplified the courage to be vulnerable, to extend a hand when every instinct for self-preservation screamed otherwise, and to prioritize a universal bond over tribal allegiance. Such an act underscored that true strength often lay not in aggressive assertion, but in the profound inner resolve to choose connection, even when it meant risking personal safety or social ostracism. It was a testament to the quiet heroism found in defying the narratives of hatred, opting instead for the intricate complexities of shared existence. Philosophically, this singular event posed a formidable challenge to deterministic views of human nature, particularly those that posit an inherent malevolence or an unyielding propensity for conflict. It offered compelling evidence for an underlying benevolent potential, a fundamental goodness that, though often obscured by circumstance or ideology, could never be entirely extinguished. The medic's decision served as a powerful counter-argument to the bleakest assessments of humanity, suggesting that moments of crisis could, paradoxically, illuminate our deepest capacities for altruism. It affirmed that even when confronted with the most dire provocations, the individual retains the profound agency to choose compassion, thereby asserting a resilient belief in a core, redeeming aspect of the human spirit. Moreover, the interaction between the medic and the child, devoid of shared language, underscored the potent force of unspoken understanding. Their connection transcended linguistic and cultural barriers, communicating through the primal idioms of fear, protection, and eventual trust. This silent dialogue revealed a universal grammar of human experience, a shared emotional landscape that predates words and uniforms. It highlighted how intent, conveyed through gesture and presence, can bridge chasms that spoken rhetoric often widens, demonstrating that the deepest forms of communication often reside in the realm of shared vulnerability and mutual recognition. It was a powerful lesson in the efficacy of empathy as a primary mode of connection. Now, consider how this applies when you encounter situations where words fail, or where deeply entrenched divisions seem insurmountable. The medic's profound act reminds us that genuine connection can often be forged not through eloquent argument, but through simple, direct acts of human kindness. His enduring story serves as a perennial invitation to look beyond the surface, to seek the shared pulse of life in every encounter, and to remember that even in the most fractured world, the choice to offer light remains a powerful and transformative act, capable of creating pathways where none seemed possible. The enemy soldiers, who had moments ago held the power of life and death, found their own internal landscapes irrevocably altered by the medic's selfless act. Their rifles, poised for aggression, had lowered not merely out of tactical assessment, but from an undeniable jolt to their core convictions. This wasn't a surrender, but a profound pause, a chasm of human recognition opening amidst the fog of war. The image of a uniformed adversary, bleeding yet resolutely shielding an innocent, tore through their carefully constructed perception of the enemy as a monolithic, dehumanized force. It was a visceral challenge to the very essence of their indoctrination, leaving a distinct and unsettling imprint on their consciences, far more enduring than any fleeting tactical maneuver. This unexpected encounter, a brief interlude in the relentless march of conflict, ignited a quiet internal dissonance within them. The stark, propaganda-fueled narratives of absolute evil, meticulously woven by their commanders, suddenly unraveled in the face of such raw, undeniable humanity. Each soldier, in his own private thoughts, wrestled with the implications. If this enemy could embody such profound compassion, what did that say about the righteousness of their cause? The rigid framework of their wartime morality, once seemingly unbreakable, now bore hairline fractures, allowing slivers of doubt and introspection to penetrate their hardened resolve. It was akin to a single, unexpected note of harmony disrupting a cacophony of discord, forever altering the listener's perception of the entire composition. Meanwhile, the child, rescued from the debris and the immediate threat, embarked on a different, yet equally profound journey of internal processing. Though too young to articulate the event, the primal experience of extreme terror, followed by an unexpected life-saving embrace from an enemy, left an indelible, if subconscious, imprint. This single act of protection, devoid of language or nationalistic context, became a foundational stone in the architecture of their developing psyche. It shaped their nascent understanding of safety, trust, and the complex, often contradictory, nature of human beings. The memory might be fragmented, a series of sensory impressions rather than a coherent narrative, but its emotional residue undoubtedly influenced their capacity for empathy and their openness to others in later life. As years passed, this child, now an adult, may not have consciously recalled the medic's face or uniform, but the profound sensation of being saved by an anonymous hand would persist as an undercurrent of their worldview. It might manifest as an unusual resilience in the face of adversity, a deep-seated belief in the inherent goodness of strangers, or an intuitive aversion to simplistic categorization of people. This subtle, pervasive influence, a quiet hum beneath the surface of conscious thought, shaped their interactions, fostering a predisposition towards understanding rather than immediate judgment. It was as if a tiny, unseen seed of universal kindness had been planted in their earliest moments, slowly blossoming into a unique capacity for connection. Crucially, these individual experiences, both of the medic and the soldiers who witnessed him, served as potent, lived refutations of the pervasive wartime propaganda. While official channels churned out narratives of absolute enemy depravity, These personal encounters provided undeniable counter-evidence. They demonstrated, with visceral clarity, that shared humanity could transcend political directives and manufactured hatred. This profound chasm between the orchestrated rhetoric and the raw, undeniable reality of human connection created a space for critical thought, challenging the absolute authority of the state's narrative and affirming the enduring power of individual moral discernment. It illustrated that the truth of human nature often asserts itself most powerfully in the quiet, defiant moments that reject manufactured division. Now, consider how this applies when confronting deeply ingrained societal narratives or biases in our own time. When confronted with sweeping generalizations or dehumanizing portrayals of any group, recognizing the power of these individual counter-narratives becomes paramount. Such stories, often untold or overshadowed, remind us that the complexity of human experience always defies simplistic labels. They urge us to seek out and amplify the individual acts of grace that challenge prevailing prejudices, thereby fostering a more nuanced and empathetic understanding of our shared world. By acknowledging these profound moments, we actively participate in dismantling the walls of division and cultivating a collective conscience rooted in compassion. Reflecting on this intricate journey through the crucible of human experience, we find ourselves at a precipice, gazing upon a panorama sculpted not by the grand forces of geopolitics, but by the subtle, persistent currents of the human spirit. The distinct narratives, once seemingly disparate threads woven into the fabric of conflict, now converge, revealing a deeper, more profound pattern. This pattern speaks to an inherent resilience, a stubborn insistence on connection that defies the brutal logic of division, suggesting that the deepest truths about our shared existence often emerge not from the loud proclamations of power, but from the quiet, almost imperceptible shifts within individual hearts. The very landscape of our understanding is reshaped, not by the architectonics of destruction, but by the organic growth of empathy, a silent, powerful force that reclaims ground from the barren fields of animosity. Drawing these strands together, we discern a compelling argument for the enduring power of individual moral agency. It becomes clear that even when caught in the relentless machinery of collective animosity, the capacity for choice remains, a profound testament to an unyielding inner freedom. These moments, where the uniform momentarily yields to the human, do not erase the scars of conflict, but they fundamentally redefine the terms of engagement, offering glimpses of a world where shared vulnerability forms a more potent bond than any ideological barrier. The sheer audacity of such grace, blossoming in the most infertile ground, serves as a powerful reminder that the human spirit possesses an extraordinary capacity to transcend its own self-imposed limitations. In light of these insights, the path forward becomes clearer, albeit no less challenging. The reverberations of a singular, selfless act extend far beyond its immediate moment, influencing the unseen currents of collective consciousness and shaping the moral contours of an age. Like a stone dropped into a vast lake, creating ripples that eventually touch every shore, such profound acts transform the entire surface of our shared reality. This journey through moments of profound human encounter offers not just a recounting of history, but an invitation to perceive the enduring power embedded within the choices we make, particularly when confronted with the starkest of divisions. It compels us to consider how these echoes, though faint, persist through time, shaping the very air we breathe and the values we hold. As we pivot towards the final reflection, one cannot help but contemplate the transformative potential inherent in acknowledging these profound human exchanges. They challenge the simplistic narratives that perpetuate division, urging us instead to embrace the intricate complexities of shared existence. The wisdom gleaned from these crucible moments suggests that true strength resides not in the ability to dominate, but in the courage to connect, to see the shared humanity beneath layers of difference. This reevaluation of strength and heroism opens new vistas for understanding our collective past and for envisioning a more integrated future. The very definition of heroism expands, encompassing the quiet defiance of a compassionate heart. Ultimately, these interwoven experiences illuminate a profound truth, that even in the darkest trenches of despair, a persistent, unwavering light can be found. It is a light fueled by empathy, sustained by courage, and amplified by the enduring human yearning for connection. This radiant thread, woven through the fabric of conflict, offers not just solace, but a powerful blueprint for navigating the complexities of our own contemporary challenges. It is a testament to the idea that the most profound lessons are often absorbed through lived experience, shaping our internal compasses in ways that transcend any explicit instruction, guiding us towards a more humane and interconnected world. The profound echoes of humanity, reverberating from the shattered landscapes of a world consumed by conflict, ultimately converge into a singular, undeniable truth, that even amidst the most profound darkness, the light of compassion stubbornly persists. These are not mere historical footnotes, anomalies in a grim tapestry, but rather foundational pillars of our collective spirit, reminding us that the human heart, though capable of immense cruelty, also harbors an inextinguishable capacity for grace. The stories of unexpected empathy, like that of the medic and the child, transcend the specific coordinates of war, evolving into timeless parables that challenge our deepest assumptions about human nature. They compel us to look beyond the uniforms, the flags, and the manufactured divisions, urging us to recognize the shared pulse of life that binds us all, regardless of the battle lines drawn by ideology or fear. This enduring resonance is not a naive dismissal of suffering, but a profound affirmation of our innate potential for connection, a testament to the resilience of the human soul. What these narratives ultimately bequeath to us is a radically transformed understanding of heroism and survival. It is a heroism found not solely in acts of conquest or strategic brilliance, but in the quiet, defiant choice to extend kindness when every instinct, every command, every shred of conventional wisdom dictates otherwise. The true battle, it reveals, is often fought within the confines of one's own conscience, a struggle to uphold a universal ethic when the world demands tribal allegiance. The elixir brought back from such harrowing journeys is a profound shift in perspective. The realization that vulnerability can be a source of immense strength, and that the act of seeing another's humanity, even in enemies, is the most powerful weapon against the forces of division. This hard-won wisdom, forged in the crucible of despair, becomes a guiding star, illuminating pathways toward reconciliation where only chasms once appeared. These echoes are not confined to the past. They resonate with an urgent relevance in our contemporary world. They serve as a constant, gentle provocation, urging us to confront the persistent divisions that continue to fragment our societies. In an era often characterized by polarization and the rapid spread of dehumanizing narratives, the lessons of the medic and countless others become indispensable. They remind us that the most profound and lasting change often begins not with grand pronouncements or political maneuvering, but with individual acts of audacious empathy. The true practice of humanity begins now, in our daily interactions, in our willingness to challenge our own biases, and in our courageous commitment to seek out and affirm the shared humanity in those we are conditioned to view as other. The legacy of these moments is therefore not a passive inheritance, but an active call to ongoing reflection and deliberate action. It is an invitation to cultivate a deep-seated belief in the transformative power of compassion, to nurture the fragile seeds of understanding even in the most barren emotional landscapes. While kindness may not unilaterally end wars, it profoundly shapes the world that emerges from their ashes. It builds bridges where walls once stood, mends fractured spirits, and instills a persistent hope that transcends the cyclical nature of conflict. This enduring message, carried forth through generations, affirms that the light of humanity, though sometimes dimmed, can never be extinguished, always finding a way to shine through the debris, reminding us of our shared capacity to heal, to connect, and to ultimately choose a future defined by empathy.